Hi there, my name's Arron Gill and welcome to 100 Stories Deep. Today I'm going to be reading from the Bear Lit anthology and I'm going to be reading a story called Kali by the author Kajal Odedra. And the reason why I have chosen this book today, or this story today, is because I think it does a really good job in challenging us to think about when we want to help somebody, do we really have them in mind, or do we sometimes help people for our own need to be proven right? Okay, so the story called Kali. Krishna sat next to her brother, holding his hand, handling conversation topics like shiny objects on a shopping channel. Anything to engage him. Raju was unresponsive, looking despondent, as though the entire day's ceremony had nothing to do with him. He sat in the corner of the room, staring at the TV, rolling Indian news. Sound washing over him as if watching the sea, mesmerised by the moving images. At 25, he was a grown man. When he stood, he towered over his mother and sister. In the last year, he had gained weight that gathered at his belly, making it protrude, making his mud-green jumper stretch. He looked like a child who had outgrown his clothes. The family fussed around him as others arrived. His aunt, uncle and grandmother. Raju remained still in the corner as the room played on fast forward. Tidying, searching, preparing. He looked like he was on pause. On the surface, this looked like any other family gathering hosted at the Sainis' home. Raju's mother had grown 3 pairs of hands as she boiled rice, flipped chapati and crushed garlic to make enough food to feed a village. But unlike previous gatherings, there were no cars spilling out of the driveway and lining this tiny street in the middle of Birmingham. No children running from room to room, under tables, through legs. There were a few guests, only close family. No one could know this was happening. Unlike at other gatherings, the mood was sombre. The weight of the occasion hung over them like lead. Tones were hushed as the family gathered in the living room, cross-legged on the floor. At that moment, the living room door opened and in came a small, older woman. The room tensed. The reason for the gathering could no longer be avoided. She moved slowly, the old lady. Her lilac cotton sari cloaked her lowered head. Her greying hair pulled back in a bun with thick white strands straggling free. Her skin was dark, darker than most who sat in the room, and it was wrinkled, making the woman look twisted. She looked like she'd been squeezed and stretched. Raju's mother fussed to make a clearing, a stiff smile and wide eyes giving her nerves. She ushered Krishna into the kitchen to bring a chair and place it in the middle of the room. The woman smiled politely, declining the chair. She sat on the floor, her legs crossed, baring her rough, drying feet with crooked toenails that looked centuries old. When Krishna had come home from university that week, she had found Raju in the same spot, in the corner of the living room staring at the TV. His eyes looked drunk, red and blurry. There used to be a white around his iris. Now there was off-white, almost yellow. 2 years older than her, Raju had always felt like her younger brother. When they were 8 and 10, their parents questioned the children about a suspicious phone bill. Unknown numbers listed, each call lasting only a few seconds. Krishna knew that this had nothing to do with her and Raju because they shared everything. They spent every moment together, sharing a room, sharing secrets. They would stay up late, with their beds pushed together, inventing games. Raju loved the one where they drew pictures on each other's backs and you had to guess what the picture was, following the slow, steady tracing of a finger. It tickled, but it was never unbearable. It was soft and comforting. She had been confused when she had overheard her mother crying to her father that she had caught Raju in the act, making phone calls to women he found in the phone book, listening to them speak and then hanging up. She had heard her mother crying about Sharam. The shame. Krishna didn't understand. If it was a game, then why didn't they all play together? The phone call stopped, and it was never mentioned. When their father died suddenly, 4 years later, everyone told Raju that he had to be the man of the house. He was just a teenager. The weight of his future felt crippling. He couldn't do it. Krishna watched him withdraw. He became quiet. That was when they grew apart. "Raju, how are you doing? Have you been to work this week?" Krishna asked her brother softly. As though in slow motion, he turned from the screen to his sister. Looking vacant, he smiled. Krish, can you help me? I can't find my watch. Mum said she looked, but I don't think she really looked. Will you help?" His arms stretched out, Krishna crouched down to the seat to hug her brother. Her heart sank. She could smell the body odour mixed with the smell of food and the mustiness of clothes worn for days. She felt the fat his body had gained since the last she saw him. In the year that she had been studying medicine at Imperial College, Raju had been married and divorced. Their mother had his marriage quickly arranged, worried about what it would become of her declining son. It was difficult to find a family who would take on a boy as shy and as awkward as Raju. So after searching in the UK, she gave up and arranged his marriage to a village girl from Gujarat. This was a sure bet. Everyone knew that village girls were desperate for a visa, for a British passport. During this time, Krishna got a phone call from Raju out of the blue. "How's uni, Krish?" The music in his voice, the melody and rhythm had flattened. He never called. She knew this wasn't just a check-in. "How are you, Raju? And Mum? And work? Is everything okay over there?" He had got a job working in the uncle's mini-mart, managing the shop floor. The job was given out of loyalty and put their mum's mind at ease, knowing her son was working. "Mum said I should speak to you. I don't want to get married, Krish. She said you'll help me understand." He blurted out the words and then fell silent. Raju wasn't used to asking for things, and this was a plea for help. Krishna could hear how naked and vulnerable he felt as soon as the word left his mouth. How hot tears blurred her vision. She blinked to force them away. I don't know, Raju. Maybe this is a good plan for you." "What else will you do?" "Work with Uncle. Mum says I should marry because people will talk if I don't. But I don't want that, Krish." Her heart ached. She wanted to protect him. "What's the girl like? Does she seem nice?" This was a futile question. Raju had spent 10 minutes on the phone with his prospective bride while his mother sat at his side. They spoke about their parents and siblings. They discussed what they did on weekends, which wasn't a lot. The conversation felt strained, and they were struggling for topics. Krishna agreed to speak to their mother, to persuade her to relax, to let Raju be for a few more years. He wasn't living to his mother's expectations, but Krishna could see that he was content, working with his uncle, who was like a father to Raju, and coming home to play football on his computer. Her brother was a late developer. Maybe he would mature later than her. But Krishna's words fell on deaf ears, and a month later Raju was flown to India to marry Shilpa, who spoke broken English and had never lived away from home. Raju's new bride was homesick almost as soon as she arrived in the UK. She pined for the security of familiar things. The soft feel of an old 10 rupee note, the heat of the dusty floor at the midday on her bare feet. She missed squatting to go to the toilet, chopping vegetables in the morning sun. But she kept quiet and subservient. cooking and cleaning in the house to pass the time, all the while growing bitter towards her groom. 6 months passed and something snapped. Shilpa left Raju. How could this happen? Just after a few months, why hadn't he asked his mother to help? He couldn't answer his mother's desperate questions. You see, Shilpa moved in to Leicester with some family, and soon it was rumoured that they had never consummated their marriage. Though Raju's mother tried hard to make Shilpa part of the family, she couldn't resolve what was happening in their bedroom. Losing control and fiercely protective, Raju's mother confronted Shilpa. She heard what had gone on that year, how they slept on opposite sides of the bed. He doesn't touch me, Sasu. How do you expect women to live like this? How do you expect me to give you grandchildren? Shilpa Bette, we work on these things. Men are different to us. We have to be patient. They were desperate, the both of them, convinced that Raju needed help. But their idea of help was at odds, and they came to no resolution. Gossip within the community was like tar. It reeked and was impossible to remove, and Raju was stained. It was never mentioned in their house again. By the time Krishna returned home, her brother had been broken by the power of the women that surrounded him. His innocence was battered. He sat vacant on rewind at the same seat every day, staring at the TV screen. He's not the same. Krishna's mother looked like she hadn't slept, her brown eyes sunken like two wells. He's been through so much. Dad's death, divorce. Don't talk about divorce. He hasn't said one word about that. He stopped washing, he complains about a headache every day, and now, for the last few weeks, he only asks for you. Krishna's mother had a hand on her forehead or her chest whenever she spoke these days, as though she was clutching her heart and head to stop them from spilling open. Something has happened to him. I told your uncle to take him to the temple. God is our only hope now. What did the doctor say? Your uncle spoke to the priest. He said Raju might be possessed. He's not himself. It's in his soul, Krishna. It's dark. Something bad has got hold of him. I asked your auntie, what did I do? What did I do wrong? You haven't taken him to Dr. Patel, have you? Your auntie thinks maybe I spoke ill against the Bhagavan. It's my fault. I've cursed Raju. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. But the priest said that this happens. It happened to your second cousin's wife in India, Vali. Did you hear about that? They ignored it. They did nothing. Oh, she was just like Raju, losing her mind. Oh, Vali, poor Vali. Krishna, they found her in her house. She hung herself. She had 2 little babies. Krishna wondered if her mother actually enjoyed the drama. Mum, please, promise not to speak like this in front of him. You think he's ill because you spoke against God? This kind of talk is what's making him ill. We need to get him on antidepressants, get him some exercise. Shame on you, Krishna. You want to give your brother drugs, antidepressants? No son of mine is going to the doctor to tell him he's crazy. He isn't himself. You don't understand these things. I told you, the priest said, it's happened before to people in the community. Something bad has gotten in his soul. It's a bad spirit. The priest will help us. Thank God, thank Rama, thank Sita. He knows a lady who can look at him. Krishna had tried to stop her mother from arranging the ceremony. But, like a woman possessed or a mother in the grips of desperation, she had stopped listening to the protests. In the days leading up to it, they had talked every night. Her mother haunted with the thoughts that she had cursed her family. Since returning from university, Krishna had noticed the growing presence of God in their house. It grew like the moon, until it was only possible to see it in its own light. Her mother, who had always been religious but never a zealot, had taken to spend more time at the shrine dedicated to Ganesh, the remover of obstacles. She sat there for hours, lighting balls of cotton wool soaked in oil, waving incense, rearranging the monuments. She wasn't sleeping, but spent hours on the phone to her sister talking about God. Was she cursed? She had lost her husband and now her son. The shame. When Krishna heard that her mother mutter over and over about Shram and Uzat, obsessing about covering the family's shame, keeping their honour, she began to see the illusion of their community unravel. It was a lie designed to create control, and it was poisonous. It was poisoning her family. Running through every possibility, her mother managed to pinpoint the exact moment when she had made remarks about one of the gods. She had spoken ill about Kali, the goddess of destruction, and now she was being punished. She started to pray to a picture of Kali every morning. A black figure with a necklace of heads, a skirt of arms, and lolling tongue. Kali's image was violent. She was dishevelled and chaotic, and the value placed on her in their household made even a picture in a frame seem dangerous. Krishna felt on the edge around it, but never mentioned this to her mother, who begged for Kali's forgiveness. She often sat in silence in the living room, clutching the prayer beads between her fingers, rubbing them while muttering words of devotion to the gods under her breath. It was her mother who had wanted Krishna to be a doctor, pressured her to study medicine, get a good job, get a good salary. Doctors were respected, but she refused to let her son see one. It was the shame. In the days leading up to the ceremony, Krishna had spent time with her brother. He was a different person to the boy she had grown up with. He spent hours lying in his dank, musty bed. He sobbed about the headaches, so she took to placing cold, wet flannels on his forehead. It was no surprise, Krishna thought, that he was taking comfort in the Gita too. For most of the day she would find him with the book on his lap, his index finger following each line, devouring every word. She asked him if she wanted to see the doctor. "Mum says I'm not crazy. God will make this go away." She thought about madness, about what she had expected it to look like. That nobody really knows until it was there, in front of you. The hysteria her mother was creating. That was madness, Krishna thought. The woman in the lilac sari opened a carrier bag and placed copies of the Gita to her right. She took out a container of olive oil, a purple packet of incense, and a spray bottle of water and placed them to her left. She pointed at Raju and beckoned him over. Raju had snapped out of his trance for the first time since Krishna had been home. He looked around the room, taking in what was happening, his eyes welling up. Krishna held tightly onto her brother's hand. Their aunt marched over and pulled his other hand, pushing him to the centre of the room. The lady took a copy of the Gita and began to read it. Her voice tense and twisted like her skin, chanting passages for several minutes. She had full command of the room. Raju, opposite, looking to the ground as the rains of Sanskrit spilled from her mouth. The words were like weights, pushing him down into the ground. With every syllable, Krishna felt like it would be harder to lift him up. A silky, dark, wrinkled hand placed on Raju's forehead pushed him down to her feet while she was chanting. When she had his head firmly to the carpet, she fell silent, closing her eyes, her hand still pressed to his head. She shrieked, a high-pitched and wobbly cry, unsettling everyone in the room. Her small, black eyes opened, two shiny beads staring down at Raju. She asked the spirit slowly for its name. She was speaking to Raju as though he was the devil. His eyes were wide and he held out his mouth in a grimace. He was barely breathing. Once, when they were little, Raju had pushed Krishna with more force than he realised, sending her toppling into the fireplace with the fire burning. Raju's face had been crumpled in devastation. Krishna was mildly burnt, but Raju was scarred, mortified at what he had done. He was inconsolable. He cried until he fell asleep that night, his pillow soaked and his heart exhausted. He looked like that boy now. The lady began rocking side to side, chanting faster and louder. Side to side, chanting faster and louder and louder. The swaying and volume grew and then stopped. That's when the sobbing began. Krishna's mother now poured into the chaos, sobbing quietly. Her sobs turned to prayers. Her aunt rushed across the room to comfort the sister, stroking her head to her breast and swaying side to side like the old lady. The whole room now felt like it was swaying side to side. Raju now lay horizontally on the floor. The old lady was squatting over him and waving lit sticks of incense over his body, drawing lines of smoke over his face. Her tight white bun was breaking free and her sari had come loose, hanging from her shoulder, waving around like a third arm. An unruly Ganesh. The sound of the number 8 bus rolling down the road leaked into their private ceremony. The bus breaking at the stop opposite their house, and then the engine started again and it rode away. There was a world out there that didn't know what was happening on this street on the outskirts of the city. In this semi-detached house with a Ford Mondeo parked outside. Krishna wanted to gasp for air. The room was suffocating. The smell of patchouli from the incense, thick and sweet like a patchouli-soaked cloth being stuffed down her throat. Amata, chala jao! The lady now had her hands pressed on Raju's chest and was screaming at the spirit, telling it to leave. Chale jao! The room seemed smaller, like the walls had moved in. Krishna wanted to pick Raju up and lead him out of there. She looked at the mother, aunt, uncle and grandmother. They were all gripped. There was hope in their eyes. Her uncle was nodding, urging the lady to win in this battle against evil. Her grandmother looked like she was watching a soap opera. Her face was animated, though this wasn't really happening to real people right in front of her. Looking down at her brother, Krishna saw that he had zoned out again. His eyes glazed over, staring at the ceiling. After the ceremony, the old lady was taken into the kitchen for tea and biscuits. Sitting at the same table, sipping at their saucers, the older women made small talk as though wrapping up a business deal. How's the rest of the family? Good? Yes. Daughter is studying medicine at a very good university, Imperial College. She will be a doctor very soon. A doctor! Very good, very important. You will find her a good husband. Krishna helped Raju to his feet, his face wet with tears. He looked at his sister like he was 5 years old and fallen off his bike. He slowly sat down on the sofa in front of the corner of the room. He stared at the TV and began swaying side to side. Krishna placed her palm to her forehead. Her head had started to ache. She needed a cold flannel. Was the madness catching? Raju sat, his mouth hanging slightly open, but he wasn't speaking. She crouched down next to him. Raju, how are you feeling? He didn't look at her this time. He began tapping himself on his chest. Is it gone now? I don't know, Raju. Does it feel like it's gone? A week had passed, and though she felt strange about returning to university, Krishna felt a little relieved to be leaving. She went into Raju's room to say goodbye, but he wasn't there. She hadn't looked in his room for a few days. It was different. The sheets were fresh, the curtains open. His clothes, which had usually been piled up in a heap like a creature at the end of his bed, were now folded on his chest of drawers, ready to be put away. She went downstairs to look for him and found both Raju and her mother in the kitchen doing chores together. In the last few weeks the house felt like it was feeding off chaos, the walls, the furniture absorbing and breeding insanity. Now Raju sat at the kitchen table pouring spices into containers. Their mother was at the other end of the table organising the nice crockery into sets. They both seemed less frantic. Raju was still subdued but laughing at his mother's jokes. His state was less trance-like. He was aware of his surroundings, comfortable moving around. He seemed less distressed, almost at peace. Krishna had expected a fight until her last day to persuade her mother to take Raju to the doctor, but as the days passed, this seemed unnecessary. He had even started to shower and was eating with the family at mealtimes. He was still clutching at the Gita. It never left his side. He would spend each morning and evening reading it quietly in his room, and their mother continued to devote hours each day to her religious shrine, constantly rubbing the wooden balls of her beads between her thumb and index finger. Krishna was waiting for Raju to slip, to break down and need her help. But he never did. She thought the spiritual ceremony would traumatise him, but in the days after he seemed calmer. He was becoming more devout, but she could hardly fault his newfound focus and patience. She should have felt relieved, happy for him, but she felt guilty that she wanted to be right. She was ashamed that a medicine woman had been allowed into their home and helped her brother. That this had been in her own home in Britain, not some regressive village in India. That he was fast becoming dedicated to religion. She should have felt relieved to go back to university knowing her brother was at peace and her mother at ease. But Krishna felt like she had lost. Before she left, she asked the mother whether the medicine woman would come back. Krishna, let's pray the spirit never comes back. I can't afford to bring her in again. I don't think we need to. He is getting what he needs from God. We paid her. Of course we paid her, Krishna. She has a special gift from God. She needs to be supported. We must give these people our complete respect. And that doesn't matter now. Look at him. I think he must go back to work soon. Thank Rama. We must thank Rama every day. And you thought your brother was crazy. So yeah, that was Kali by Kajal Odedra, and that is in the Bear Lit anthology. So yeah, I want to think that a lot of people right now, especially black people, during the riots, during the protests across the world, need support, and we need, as brown people, as other people of colour, as white people you might be, to stand and to show and to provide solidarity and support. So what this led me to think was, how can I best support the people that I know and I love and I hold dear to me, that are part of my community, that are part of my life, that are part of the world that I live in. People have different supporting mechanisms, people have different needs and wants and desires. Some things work for some people, some things don't work for others. So yeah, I just want you to spend a little bit of time thinking of somebody that you think you might be in need. And I want you to sort of think about different solutions that you can do to support them. Not centering yourself in those, so you not wanting to be the saviour, but centering the other person in the situation, and asking what are their needs, what are their desires, and what are all the different ways that I can show support. My name's Arron Gill. Yeah, this has been 100 Stories Deep. If you want to see more videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and lots of further links in the description box below. Thanks.